Make D.C. safe again. It is that simple, you dumb hippies. FBI Director Kash Patel earlier gave us all the goods on how it's happening in just a few weeks.
Thanks again to President Trump. His initiative to clean our streets and rid of violent criminals starting in our nation's capital. Let me speak to just briefly what the FBI did last night. FBI had 41 arrests last night, including 6 gun seizures and 8 drug seizures. In just 1 week alone, we have 550 total arrests of violent criminals, including dozens of firearms and 40 drug seizures, to include narcotics, meth, fentanyl, cocaine, and violent crimes such as rape, homicide, assaults, all here in our nation's capital.
And here now live in studio, Fox News contributor, former NYPD inspector and attorney, Paul Mauro. Paul, great to see you. So this is the hill these old elderly hippies want to cop a squat on. And that's standing up for criminals and violence and not standing up for victims and law-abiding residents. But part of it isn't, I think, just cleaning up D.C. It's setting an example and for every kind of leader across the nation and shining a light on those who won't enforce the law.
Yeah, and I think that's actually part of the strategy, as Vice President Vance kind of laid it out, because let's remember, they have more leverage in D.C., they being the Trump administration, because it's federalized already, and they have this 30-day window under the codicil that's in the home rule law to enforce. The problem is they can't export that to other cities around the country because they're not federalized the way D.C. is. So what they want to do was show, and it's working, that, look, if you enforce, if you actually do the work, it actually works. It actually will happen. You'll get criminals off the street, and you'll have your citizenry be safer. But as you can see, there is this far-left aspects of the Democratic Party, which is where all the ambition and energy is. And it's funny, it's either the young or the very old hippies, as the vice president pointed out, that have sort of colluded here to resist any common sense reforms to the criminal justice nonsense that we're seeing going on in the blue cities.
Yeah, Paul, crazy concept. You enforce the law, crime goes down. Novel concept, right? I wanted to ask you, so the Trump administration is investigating police officials and whether Washington, D.C. had the falsified crime records to make it appear as if crime were down. Also, we know back in, I think it was July, a police commissioner was suspended as well for potentially cooking the books. What do you make of that, and how much do you think that's happening in some of these other blue cities?
Well, it does. You know, again, it goes to the schizophrenia in the Democratic Party on this issue, because they want to contend that they are a law and order party, right? But they just don't want to do anything like locking anybody up. And so a better answer for them, if you're sitting where they are, is to cook some books. Now, look, it hasn't been proven in a court of law, so we'll have to see how it shakes out. You know, we got the investigation going on. But I can tell you, there's cooking the books and then there's cooking the books. And you have a lot of leeway as a commanding officer, which is what this guy was, reportedly the commanding officer of one of the precincts. You have the ability to downgrade crimes, to mess a little bit with what exactly happened. Maybe you lose the complainant, so you get rid of the crime. It never ends up in the index. And so, consequently, you can drive crime down artificially. And that looks to be the contention here. And yet, despite all of that, the conditions were still terrible. Anybody who's gone through Union Station recently, and I go through fairly regularly, terrible. You know, as soon as you get off the train, you can sense it. And never mind walking around in the area. I've done that as well. So they had this problem, and rather than actually address the problem through the enforcement that everybody knows works, see, we got this right. In the 90s, broken windows worked, but they just can't deal with it.
Boom. Lived through it. Moving here in late 93. Lived through it.
Exactly.
When the murder, number of murders was at north of 2,200 in New York.
That's right.
What is it now? 300?
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be about 300, which is, you know, astronomically lower. But that's not the proper metric, in my estimation, as people who live here, because you can see the conditions, the quality of life has not commensurately improved.
No, and we were talking about it in the break. A lot of it's the seriously mentally ill on the subways that they don't know how to handle. I want to move on to this, though.
Yeah.
Adam Schiff has launched a legal defense fund in response to the Department of Justice investigation into mortgage fraud. This came from Bill Pulte, a referral letter. He's the head of the Federal Housing Finance Agency.
Right.
And this is in front of a grand jury in Maryland.
Yeah.
Tish James, AG here, in front of a grand jury in Virginia, and then also there we have today, Bill Pulte has also kind of waved the flag about similar charges against Fed Governor Lisa Cook. But I digress. He needs a legal defense fund?
Yeah, I mean, you know, apparently he can't afford his own attorney. And by the way, he's gotten a very high-powered attorney. Reportedly, his attorney for this mortgage fraud is Preet Bharara, former head of DOJ here in New York, the head of the New York Southern District, which is like the premier district in the country. That's not a cheap date, okay? So he's gone high, and then he expects other people to fund it. And all I can do is to say that, you know, it tracks, because this is Tish James's strategy as well, except she got it through the legislature. And consequently, the taxpayers of New York are on the hook. For her defense, they started a $10 million fund to defend themselves from Donald Trump right around when they started to look at her for the mortgage fraud. So this is a pattern.
Well, Paul, it's important to remember that no one is above the law.
Apparently.
We were told this.
So, listen, who knew? They got Capone on taxes. Who knew that mortgage fraud was going to be the thing that was going to come out of the woodwork? And it's Tish James that opened this up, because that's what she went after Donald Trump for. The difference is that in Donald Trump's case, there's absolutely no complaint. There's no contention that anybody lost any money, because he paid the loans back. The banks wanted to give it, and he took it. In the cases of that we're talking about here, Tish James, Schiff, and this third piece, there is the possibility, because a lower rate was achieved, that the banks were cheated, and that's why the case could be federal.
But no, but also, just with Schiff as an example, this was a Fannie Mae loan.
Yeah.
It's not just the low rate, it is the low down payment. So if you lie about a place being a primary residence, that just is bank fraud. But you're defrauding the federal government and the American taxpayer.
That's right.
Because we all own a piece. Every taxpayer is guaranteed a piece of that mortgage. We've all been there. If you don't, like, I can't live in New York and work here and then say Cincinnati is my primary residence. Any lender would say no. Except maybe Schiff's lender.
I know people.
Shifty Shift appropriately named.
Exactly, and he's just proving it every day. I know people who live outside of New York, have to come here regularly to work, and literally keep a log and make sure to the day that they have the majority of their time outside of New York, so that they're not breaking any tax laws. Apparently, Congress and the rest of the Democratic regime here seems to be immune.
Yeah.
Paul Mauro, you're the best.
Thanks
for
you
joining
guys.
us.
Appreciate it.
Good to see you.